After the major success of the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, the British developer Rare was on top of the world, and when the Nintendo 64 came around, they kept their streak going. Not only did they release GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, but they also produced Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, and Donkey Kong 64, some of the best 3D platformers of the 5th generation. It's from these games that Rare solidified their ability to create cartoonish, family-friendly platforming games that could appeal to everybody. But after a long string of these games, critics were worried that the Rare formula would run dry and that the developer had no other tricks up their sleeves. Enter Conker the Squirrel, one of gaming's strangest and most unique characters. He was initially a cute, happy little guy who made his debut as a racer in Diddy Kong Racing and was set to star in his own platformer called 12 Tales Conker 64. Eventually though, the game underwent a complete overhaul and Conker was retooled into an alcoholic, smart-mouthed, sex-craved, violent, greedy, cigar-smoking dirtbag. It was a pretty controversial change, but in 2001, the end result was the cult classic, Conker's Bad Fur Day. It was a hit with both fans and critics, and forever cemented Conker's image as a mature parody of platforming mascots. And before you ask, yes, I'll cover this game another time. But during 12 Tales development, Rare also created a Game Boy Color game starring the little squirrel named Conker's Pocket Tales. It was meant to release alongside 12 Tales, but since that game never came to be, Pocket Tales is now the last remnant of Conker's innocent nature. But despite Bad Fur Day's success, Pocket Tales has been largely forgotten about. And after playing it, I can kinda see why. Pocket Tales is definitely not on the same level as its N64 brother. That's not to say the game is bad, but it isn't really unique in its gameplay or design, and a lot of the game is underwhelming as a consequence. But before I talk about the game, I should mention that the Pocket Tales cartridge is dual format, which means you can play it on both a Game Boy Color and a Game Boy. Besides the added colors, there are a few differences between the versions, mostly minor ones. The level layouts, HUD, and menus are different, but the color version allows you to save the game anywhere, whereas the Game Boy version has specific save points around the map instead. But perhaps the strangest change is in the press start screens. In the color version, it's this pleasant image of Conker's house, which is nice, the graphics are colorful, and the music fits the scene really well. What is it in the Game Boy version? They say if you stare long into the abyss stares back into you. I really don't know why anybody thought this was okay, so I'll just stick to the color version so I don't have to think about this thing anymore. So the story goes that Conker is celebrating his birthday with his girlfriend Barry, and yes, this is apparently the same Barry from Bad Fur Day, just, younger. But suddenly, the evil acorn pops out of Conker's birthday cake, kidnaps Barry, and takes all of Conker's presents, leaving him one unhappy little fellow. So it's your job to get the presents back and save Barry, and I guess save these acorn people too, but they don't really seem to be in any danger. Really, the evil acorn is a pretty pathetic villain. He ruins Conker's birthday like a jerk, and then just hangs around each level until Conker shows up so he can tell you about the upcoming boss. And is it just me, or does this picture here look like Serge Tankian wearing a hairnet? Anyway, as Conker, you travel around each world collecting presents, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You move with the D-pad and run by double tapping it, and you can move in 8 directions, which is handy for walking around enemies. You can jump, of course, and jumping while running sends you farther. Conker can also dig in these dirt patches with the select button, but this isn't used that much. Conker can't do much in attacking at first, he just has this slap that does absolutely nothing, but he can stomp on enemies by pressing A while in the air. But not too long into the game, Conker will get his famous slingshot, allowing him to attack enemies from a distance. You can pick up Conkers, not the Squirrel Conker, but the Nut Conker, which are scattered all around the world as ammo. You can also pick up health acorns to give Conker an extra hit point, and there's no limit to how much health you can have, but these acorns don't respawn, so you are limited in that regard. Most of the time, you're just moving through each stage, collecting things to move on, and solving platforming challenges. Every so often, you'll come across a puzzle that you need to solve to proceed, and most of the time, it's a box puzzle, where you have to push all the boxes into a hole in order to win. I wouldn't mind these puzzles so much, but pushing the boxes doesn't really feel right. You have to press A while holding the D-pad in a direction that you want to push, but if you're already against the box and facing the wrong direction, you can't turn around unless you back up for some reason. The puzzles get more difficult in the later stages, and by then you're dealing with so many of them that you'll dread whenever you enter a room and see that it's got boxes in it. If you mess up, pressing start resets the room, and the puzzles aren't so difficult that you won't figure it out eventually, but still, there did not need to be this many box puzzles. I don't have footage of this, but one time I accidentally accidentally ran into a locked door when I was almost done with the puzzle, and because that counts as pausing the game, all my progress was erased. That was freaking great. There are also switch puzzles where you just press switches in the right order and you're done. There's no punishment for getting it wrong, so it's only a matter of time before you solve it. But I think Rare forgot about these puzzles midway through development, because after the second level, I don't remember there being any switch puzzles, just boxes. There's also a handful of minigames that you play to earn presents, and some of them aren't bad, but most of them are either pretty forgettable or downright awful. Banjo-Tooie definitely had the better minigame, so I guess that's not really a fair comparison. The main collectibles are blue presents, and there are 8 in each world. You have to collect every one of them to beat the game, since you can't move on to the next world unless you have all the presents in the current one. But you can also collect hidden invitations and red presents if you want to go for 100%. The only purpose they serve is to increase your rank, which goes up after collecting enough stuff, and to give you a sense of completion. There are also a handful of tools that Conker can collect that mainly serve as ways to open up different parts of the levels, and not all of them are required to beat the game. You will have to revisit some areas once you have these tools to get every present and invitation though. Now, Pocket Tales is not a very open platformer. Most of the time you have to collect the presents in a certain order to move on. It's a lot like Bad Fur Day actually, where you move from one objective to the next and can't really deviate from the path. There's 2 types of levels in this game design-wise. The best ones are the open areas where you have room to explore. These worlds aren't very big, and you can talk to the NPCs who give you an idea of where the next present is, so you should never get lost in these levels. They're fun to travel through, and they remind me a lot of a banjo-kazooie level. The other worlds are long, linear hallways, and they're nowhere near as good. There's no sense of exploration here, you're just moving from one room to the next with maybe an occasional dead end leading to a hidden collectible. And almost every single present in these levels is hidden behind a damn box puzzle, and after this game, I never want to see another box again. But thankfully, the music by Evelyn Fisher and Bad Fur Day composer Robin Beanland is pretty nice. Not all the songs are memorable, but they all fit the world that they're in, and they have that classic Rare vibe that makes them really catchy. Some of the music is borrowed from 12 Tales, and there's even a version of The Old Chap from Bad Fur Day, which plays during the minigames. Graphically, I think the game is good as well, with the color palettes of each world being distinct from one another and the character sprites having an almost 3D render quality to them. It exemplifies the cute, kid-friendly image that Rare was so good at. You know, for the most part. I'm not sure how much of the art was inspired by 12 Tales, but I think they achieved something pretty nice here, especially considering it's on the Game Boy Color. I also really love Conker's walking animation when he moves down for some reason. He just looks like he exudes so much swagger. But let's look at each level individually. You start your adventure in Willow Woods, a grassy hills area that also functions as the main hub, like Windy in Bad Fur Day. It's easy enough to navigate, and there aren't too many threats to deal with, but you'll be coming back to this area a lot to get to the other levels. Nothing too interesting, but for a first level, it gets the job done, and the boss Histamine, which is a great name by the way, is incredibly simple. Just shoot his head a couple of times and boom. Vultureville is a western-themed world and is one of my favorites because it actually features a little bit of world building. You enter this old west town and you visit the Undertaker, who's apparently just been shot, and you end up being arrested because the sheriff thinks that you did it. Then you escape from jail and the sheriff is all like, "Oh, I guess you're not a bad guy after all. You want to be the deputy now?" And you go stop a bank robbery, you visit a pack of Native American acorns, and you go panning for gold. It reminds me a lot of Bad Fur Day in terms of level progression, since each new objective has its own little story to it. It's a really great world. Too bad the bosses, the vultures Sol and Luxo, are not fun at all. You can't hurt them if they're in the air, and they take a while to land. Crow Keep is up next, and it's a spooky castle in the middle of a forest. This is where the game starts becoming a platformer, since you have to jump over spikes and pits to proceed. It's not a terrible level, but it can be confusing to navigate, and you have to backtrack sometimes, which is annoying. The boss of this stage is Waldorf, who I'm convinced is Gruntilda the Witch's long-lost brother, and you fight him 5 different times in this world. The objects he throws at you are different each time, but he never changes his strategy, so fighting him just feels like busy work. The next 2 levels, the Mako Islands and Claw Swamp, you can tackle in any order you want. The Mako Islands are freaking frustrating. I like the concept of this world, a set of 5 different islands that you can swim to, but most of the level is just terrible minigames. This shooting game is just kinda boring, and the other 3 force you to mash the D-pad, which is super uncomfortable. The hurdle game isn't too bad, but the long jump requires you to mash left and right as hard as you can, and the swimming game makes you mash for an entire minute. But the boat race at the end with Conker the Skunk is really easy if you know which way to go. I don't have much to say about Claw Swamp. The level's just a long, marshy jungle hallway with mud and water that slows Conker down and tons of box puzzles. The boss, Swamp Fiend, is impossible to beat without taking damage. He has hands that appear from the ground that you need to stomp on, but you'll always take damage when you attack. I can't figure out a strategy here, I really can't. This boss is definitely the worst in the game. Beating Mako Islands and Claw Swamp lets you enter the Aztec Temple, which is just another long hallway with a temple theme and box puzzles. The fight with Golem isn't too tough since you just have to shoot conkers into his mouth when he opens it, but you also have to shoot the enemies that he spawns in order to go to the next phase. You better make sure you stock up on ammo before you go in, or you can't defeat him since there's no ammo in the boss room whatsoever. The final level, the Catacombs, is a tough gauntlet that forces you to utilize all the knowledge you've gained throughout the game. And by that, I mean it's just box puzzles again. There's no present in this level, but you can rescue your acorn friends, which the game doesn't even tell you to do, and I'm pretty sure there's no actual reward other than extra health. You don't even have to save them to beat the game. I rescued all but 2 of them before I finished the stage. And there's not even a boss fight with the evil acorn. You just find Barry, who seems awfully happy for someone who's been kidnapped, and then you have to escape before a bomb goes off. Let me talk about this final section for a second, because on my second playthrough I had basically no ammo here, and these spiders take 3 hits to kill. If you don't have any ammo, you have to deal with them in these tight platforming sections, and you're basically guaranteed to take damage. Otherwise it's pretty easy as long as you don't rush, because you have plenty of time to get out. Conker and Barry make it to safety and the bomb detonates, sending the evil acorn into space. I guess that the 2 acorn friends that I didn't rescue died in the explosion, and now their acorn souls are in heaven. This video is dedicated to their memory. The day is saved, I guess, and we end with Conker and Barry staring at each other as the moon falls behind them. I'm going to assume that after this adventure, Conker was so fed up that he got wasted and woke up in a field the next morning, ready to kick off his bad fur day. I'm honestly torn about Pocket Tales, I really am. I want to like this game because despite the rudimentary gameplay, it's competently made, decently constructed, and does have that rare charm. But a lot of the game falls short, either because it's repetitive or frustrating to play. It only takes about 2 to 3 hours to beat, and is pretty easy overall, but since the game never really goes beyond the basics of platforming, playing it isn't really fulfilling. But maybe I feel that way because, as I alluded to earlier, I played this game multiple times for this review. My first playthrough got through a good chunk of the game, but my save game got corrupted and I had to start over, and the footage for my second playthrough ended up being unusable. By the 3rd time through, I was pretty worn out, so maybe that has something to do with my thoughts on the game. I guess you'll have to play the game for yourself if you're interested, but personally, I would recommend Bad Fur Day over this. I'm sure Conker's already drunk this game out of his memory anyway, and perhaps that's for the best.